By the time my daughter tried to sell her house and my son discovered a tow truck quietly lifting his leased SUV from the driveway, I was stepping onto a ferry in Santorini with sea salt on my lips and a stamped itinerary in my pocket. The realtor called me, not them, because the name on every deed and title was mine. That is not where the story begins. It begins with the sound of a heart monitor making a skittish metronome out of my chest and the realization that the only person sitting beside my hospital bed was a stranger. I woke to the antiseptic brightness of St. Clement's, to a throat so dry it felt stuffed with old paper, to a ceiling tile with a crack that looked exactly like a gull in flight. I am 69 years old. I have 2 children, Nora and Daniel, and 3 grandchildren with laughable dimples and knees always patched with bandages. I also have a heart that, on a Tuesday morning in March, clenched like a fist and sent me tumbling into a soft, shocking silence. "Welcome back," said the woman in the vinyl chair near the window. She was my roommate, a violet scarf knotted cheerfully at her throat, her knitting pulled in her lap like a patient cat. "You scared the nurses." "I scared myself," I croaked. "How long?" 2 days on and off," she said. "I'm Tamara. We've already watched 2 quiz shows, a cooking program, and an infomercial about knives sharp enough to slice a shoe." She smiled. "Your phone is there." "It's been quiet." Quiet. The word perched on my chest like extra weight. I picked up the phone with trembling fingers. No missed calls. A single message from my neighbor asking if I wanted her to keep watering the geraniums. No Nora. No Daniel. No one asking where I was, if I was in pain, if the woman who has sent homemade birthday cards for 40 years and never missed a school play could use a warm hand to hold. "They'll come," Tamara said gently, seeing my face. "People get scared of hospitals." "I taught them not to be," I said. "But fear is selective. It avoids effort." That afternoon, Nora posted a photo to her social media smiling under cafe lights with a caption about self-care. Daniel texted something after midnight. "Sorry, missed your call, Mom. Busy. Love you." The next morning, a nurse named Lev helped me sit up and breathe into a little plastic spirometer that squeaked like a toy. When I coughed, Tamara reached for the water before I asked. She told me about her grandsons, about the puppy she named Fig because he was the color of late summer. She also asked questions that broke open rooms I had kept closed. "You don't talk about them like a woman who expects company," she said. "I talk about them like a woman who has financed their lives," I said, surprising even myself. It is strange what a heart can store. My husband, God rest him, used to say I had a talent for love as logistics, numbers, favors, calendars, casseroles. When he died, the favors multiplied. Nora and her husband wanted to move out of their cramped apartment for the kids. I bought a handsome house with a bay window and signed a transfer agreement that looked, to a tired daughter, like generosity, and to a careful mother, like a life raft with my name stitched into the underside. Daniel wanted a reliable car until the startup takes off. I put the title in a Family Trust 1 control and the registration in his glove compartment. He framed the registration and posted it online like a certificate, a symbol, and never once asked to see the deed. The papers, all of them, sit in a safe deposit box I visit twice a year like an old friend. The signature on those papers belongs to me. On one level, I gave them plenty. On another, I retained what I could live on if the world turned as cold as a hospital corridor at 3 in the morning. On the 3rd day, when the cardiologist said the phrase lucky minor infarction with the same tone I use for "it's only a scratch," I nodded and smiled and asked about medication. When he left, Tamara leaned forward. "Maybe," she said, "this is your miracle." "Really?" I said dryly. "A miracle that feels like an elephant sitting on my sternum." "Sometimes the miracle is not death," she said. "Sometimes it is the clarity that follows." Clarity arrived that evening with the sun pouring honey over the foot of my bed and the realization that I had been begging for scraps of attention from people who ate at my table every Sunday. Nora sent a worried face emoji. Daniel sent a thumbs up. They did not come. The day I was discharged, Tamara helped me pack my nylon overnight bag and tied my scarf because my hands still trembled. She asked if anyone was picking me up. "My neighbor," I said. Again. On the way out of the ward, Lev the nurse pressed a paper into my hand. A list of community heart health classes, he said. And a reminder that the hospital cafe sells terrible coffee. Don't drink it if you plan to live forever. On the curb, the spring air smelled like wet soil. My neighbor, Mila, waved from her dented hatchback. I looked back through the glass doors and saw Tamara watching me, the violet scarf bright as a promise. At home, the geraniums glowed like candied fruit. I sat in my chair and allowed myself to grieve a different kind of loss, not of a person, but of an illusion I had fed for years. At 7 in the evening, I called Nora. "Mom," she said, breathless. "I was just about to call you. It's insane here. The twins' piano recital, the dog sitter canceled, and my hair, well, nothing works. How are you?" "I was in the hospital," I said. 3 days. A pause. "Oh, Mom, why didn't you tell me?" "I told you," I said quietly. "You didn't listen." She made a stricken sound that failed to bloom into an apology. "I'll come by this weekend." This weekend, I repeated, picturing the pill organizer I would fill and refill by myself, the laundry, the quiet. Daniel did not pick up. He texted at 1:13 a.m. "You're strong, Mom. We'll celebrate soon. Promise." In the morning, I opened the small tin that holds my keys and withdrew the brass one with the blue tag. Safe deposit. After breakfast, I dressed in the red cardigan my husband always said matched my courage and caught the bus downtown. The bank vault smells like old envelopes and seriousness. The attendant slid the long metal drawer toward me with the privacy of a confessional. Inside were manila folders, clipped and labeled. I spread the papers on the table. The house Nora thinks is hers, deed held by the Merrick Family Trust, trustee, me. The car Daniel calls his, titled to Merrick Holdings, an LLC I formed after my husband passed, sole member, me. The second house I helped for the investment property they swore they would rent, quitclaim deed signed but not recorded, because recording requires my signature again, and I never signed the last page. The lawyer I had used, Ms. Klein, sharp-eyed and patient, had warned me years ago, generosity is not the same as surrender. I left the bank with my purse heavier than it had been when I entered. Paperwork can weigh more than stones. That afternoon, I wrote 2 letters in my own careful hand, dated and copied. The first asked Nora and her husband to join me for dinner on Sunday. The second asked Daniel to come by Saturday morning to help me bring up boxes from the basement. I did not mention hearts or hospitals in either. I used the only leverage that has ever worked in this family, the promise of ordinary time. Saturday arrived with rain making lace on the windows. Daniel texted 15 minutes before he was due, running late. Then, don't wait. Then nothing. I brought up the boxes myself, one at a time, the ache in my chest a murmuring ghost. Inside the boxes were photo albums, my husband's cufflinks, a silver frame with my grandparents' wedding picture, and a small leather-bound notebook labeled trips to take someday. Someday is a liar. It lives on the same street as later and eventually and never. On Sunday, I cooked pot roast because the scent of it can soften a person's heart if anything can. Nora arrived with a bouquet and guilt shining so hard on her face I had to squint. Her husband, Brett, sang out a tense hello. The twins ran straight to the cookie tin as always. I took their little hands and kissed them, breathing in shampoo and crayons. "Mom," Nora began as soon as the children clattered upstairs to watch a movie. "I'm so sorry. Work has been insane and I was in the hospital," I said. "I had a heart attack." Brett sat up straighter. "What?" "Nora, you didn't." "She told me on Tuesday," Nora said in a tiny voice. "I meant to go, but the recital and the deck contractor and the cafe," I said, not unkindly. "I know." Nora folded her hands in her lap. "Are you okay now?" "I am lucky," I said. "Lucky enough to have clarity." I looked from her to Brett. Clarity about time. Clarity about property. "We should talk about the house." "What about it?" Brett said quickly. He has always mistaken speed for power. "It belongs to me," I said. "I let you live there. I have been covering the taxes and insurance in the trust like clockwork." Nora's face went white. "No, you gave it to us. The day we moved in, you said." "I said it was yours to live in," I soothed. "I did not say I surrendered title. We signed a family use agreement." You were supposed to have supper with me every Thursday and let me read to the twins on Sundays while you napped. You were supposed to remember my birthday without a calendar reminder. Brett laughed, a dry, stunned sound. Those weren't terms. They were the only terms that mattered, I said, and heard Tamara's gentle voice in my memory. Clarity. Nora's eyes filled. Mom, you can't do this. The school, the mortgage. There is no mortgage, I said. I paid cash because I hate debt the way I hate mildew. Brett stood up as if taller might change the facts. We've been paying the utilities. We furnished the place. We painted that ridiculous blue room. The ridiculous blue room I love, I said. The one that looks like the sea. Please, Nora whispered. What are you saying? I'm saying, I replied, that after my heart attack I started to think about what belongs to me, my time, my name, my deed. I am not throwing you out. I am offering a choice. We can sign a proper lease, a €1 symbolic rent if you like, but with weekly dinners and the Sunday reading hour as part of the consideration. Or you can move within 6 months. Either way, the house remains mine. If your pride can't live with that, your pride can find you a rental. Brett stared at me as if I had transformed. In a way, I had. When they left, the bouquet still sat unopened on the counter, thirsty. I put it in water and texted Daniel, lunch tomorrow. Come hungry. No reply. Monday brought Daniel in designer sneakers and a smile that usually gets him out of trouble. He hugged me and smelled like a musky cologne that my grandmother would have called ambition. You look great, Ma, he said. Hospitals are good for you. I almost died, I said. Come to the table. We ate stew with bread and butter. I felt the familiar impulse to comfort him with extra servings and nodded at the pot instead. After seconds, after the way the butter softened him, I said, Your SUV is registered to Merrick Holdings. That is me. Your insurance lapsed last month. They sent the notice to my P.O. box. His spoon froze midway. No, it's mine. It is mine, I corrected gently. On paper and in truth. I will not be liable for your optimism. You have 2 choices. Buy it from me for €1 with a contract that you will pay the insurance on time and visit every Sunday evening for supper. Or return the keys on Friday. Mom, he said. You can't be serious. I am done with being unserious, I said. I am also done with rescuing you from consequences. Do you know what Tamara told me in the hospital? Who is Tamara? The woman who sat with me when my children didn't. That pierced. A flash of shame crossed his face, quickly masked with deflection. I was launching a feature, he said. The team needed me. I needed you, I said. I gave you a car when you needed wheels. I am asking you for Sundays and statements paid on time. His jaw worked. Fine, he said at last. Fine, I'll sign whatever. But you don't have to be cruel. I am being kind, I said. I am setting terms that would have saved me years of swallowing my pride. He signed. I made him put the insurance app on his phone and watched as he authorized autopay. That evening he sent me a meme of a kitten driving a convertible and a heart emoji. It was not a visit, but it was not silence. In the weeks that followed, the reclamation of my life moved with the efficiency I used to schedule bake sale volunteers. Ms. Klein updated the trust. We recorded a notice that any sale of the properties would require my wet signature at the registry. An assistant at the title office, an earnest young man with a haircut like a soldier, scanned my identification 5 times because he could not quite believe an old woman's hands held this much legal thunder. Most people your age, he said softly, they come here to remove their names. I am not most people, I replied. I had a heart attack and decided to live. News travels like fire through dry fields. Within a month, Brett's sister called to ask if she should still book the painter for the kitchen, or is that risky now, her tone balancing between curiosity and contempt. A tow company driver, apologetic and kind, arrived at Daniel's building at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday because his insurance payment had bounced after he tried to switch back to manual because auto pay is for people who lack self-motivation. He learned quickly that motivation is cheaper than a release fee. And Nora, dear Nora, attempted to list the house after a fight with Brett because pride never sleeps. The realtor's office called me for the property profile, and I sent back a polite sentence, not available for sale. The children asked questions in the honest way children do. Grandma, why are you famous? The twins wanted to know when their mother cried in the pantry and I arrived with soup instead of explanations. You're famous if strangers call you, one of them explained solemnly. I am not famous, I said. I am the owner of things. It is less glamorous and more work. A month after the hospital, Tamara invited me to a heart health class where people walked in circles around the community center and discussed walking like it was a new religion. We shared apples afterward in the courtyard. She wore a scarf the exact green of the leaves. Do you remember your miracle? She asked. Clarity, I said. And one other thing. I pulled the leather notebook from my tote. Trips to take someday. I set it on my lap. I decided to stop waiting. We planned. Or rather, I planned and told no one until it was done. Ms. Klein drew up travel medical insurance because, after all, I have learned where risk truly lives. I rented the little house with the blue shutters, the one Nora had never liked, to a nice couple with a cat named Prune. I moved my geraniums to Mila's yard and placed my mother's brooch in the bank vault. I bought a ticket to Rome, then a ferry ticket to Naples, then a cabin on a small ship that stops at Greek islands like beads on a string. When I told the family at Sunday supper, Daniel laughed. You? Alone? In Europe? Yes, I said. Me? Alone. In Europe. Nora gripped her glass with two hands. Mom, it's not safe. Pickpockets, stairs, the sun. What about your heart? I will walk, I said. I will rest. I will drink water and eat olives. And my heart? My heart will marvel. Who will watch the kids when we have that gala? Brett asked, as if I were a fixture like a floor lamp. Hire a sitter, I said. The twins clapped, as they always do when a new story begins. Bring us shells, they shouted. Bring us a story. I left on a Tuesday in late May. Daniel did not come to the airport, but sent a thumbs up and a rocket emoji. Nora hugged me so hard I briefly considered the irony of dying in departures. She slipped a note into my palm. Please send me your hotel addresses. I smiled and put the note in my purse, then boarded my plane with a cardigan and a promise to myself. Rome smelled like oranges and exhaust. The pensione had a courtyard with laundry strung between windows like flags of ordinary life. I ate artichokes slowly and cried once, in a church with floor stones worn thin by knees, because grief and joy used the same door. From there I took the train south along a coastline so bright it felt like the sky had fallen into the sea and shattered. In Naples, I learned to cross streets with a pilgrim's faith. A boat took me to Capri, where rocks rise out of the water like knuckles. The air tasted salted and lemon-sweet. On a bench above the marina, I met a woman with hair like smoke who sold me a straw hat and told me that nobody owns a view, which is precisely why we risk so much to stand before one. On Santorini, the white houses looked like the foam left by waves that forgot to go home. I slept with my balcony doors open so the wind could find me. In the morning, I read my notebook, trips to take someday. I crossed out someday with my pen. I wrote today. On the second island, Naxos, my phone buzzed. A brisk voice introduced herself as a realtor. Mrs. Merrick? I have a listing agreement here for your property on Bay Willow Lane. The seller's name is your daughter, but I need your signature. Thank you for your diligence, I said. That property is not for sale. A beat. I see. I'll inform her. Please also inform her, I added, that I eat olives with more grace than I have ever eaten humble pie. That evening I wrote postcards, one to the twins with a cartoon octopus, one to Daniel with a picture of a road built into a cliff face, one to Nora blank except for a drawing of a small house with smoke from the chimney and a heart above the roof. I used my best handwriting. On Paros, a tow company called to confirm payment for Daniel's car release. He is at the yard, the manager said. He says he is the owner. I am the owner, I said softly. Please process his payment using the card he has in his hand. He will pay you. And then he will call me. He called an hour later. Mom, he said. They weren't going to release it until you said the word. That's humiliating. Humiliation is a useful teacher, I said. I have met her many times. I'll fix it, he said. I'll fix everything. Just sign it over. You may earn it, I replied. Not with money. With time. In Mykonos, I watched men clean fish with the skill of surgeons. In Rhodes, I walked in the shade of walls older than my country. In a souk in Bodrum, I traded a scarf for a smile and a story and felt like a queen. I slept well. I woke thrilled. The heart, when it is obeyed, behaves. Back home, the narrative shifted. People who had never asked how I carried my groceries now asked for tips on estate planning. A neighbor sent me an article about incentive trusts, which sounded like a game show invented by lawyers. I called MS. Klein from a terrace above a harbor and said, "Tell me how to make forgiveness and architecture." "You want conditions," she said. "I want to reward responsibility and time," I said. "I want love with a spine." When I returned home in late July, the geraniums had multiplied in Mila's care. My house smelled like closed windows and waiting. I put my suitcase in the bedroom and stood still long enough to hear the air settle around me. Then I made tea, sat at the kitchen table, and opened the folder Ms. Klein had couriered over. The trust had become a map. The properties were still mine. The bank accounts were still mine. The will contained an addendum titled the Surprise Clause, which is a nicer name than the consequences of neglect. It read, in plain language, "My children will inherit only if they surprise me with time and become financially independent." Surprise me with time meant unannounced visits that have nothing to do with borrowing or asking, calls that last longer than a question, Sunday suppers attended with joy 3 out of 4 weeks without calendar invitations, holidays spent helping wash dishes. Financially independent meant 1 year without asking me for money, debts paid, insurance never lapsing, sustainable work that has dignity even if it has no glamour. It was both softer and sharper than a punishment. It was a promise to myself that I would not subsidize disrespect. It was also a door left open on its hinges. I invited everyone to dinner to announce it. Nora arrived with homemade rolls and eyes rimmed red. Daniel arrived with flowers and the careful cheerfulness of a man approaching a cliff edge. The twins sprinted to me and attached like cheerful barnacles. Brett shook my hand as if we were negotiating a contract. I supposed we were. I served lemon chicken and potatoes roasted with rosemary and listened to everyone compliment the food because compliments are a currency we still understand. When the plates were scraped clean and the twins had gone to the living room to build a fort, I told them. "I rewrote my will," I said. Nora's hand flew to her mouth. Daniel inhaled like a swimmer before the deep end. "You will inherit," I said, "if you surprise me with time and become financially independent. I am done giving people houses and then begging to be invited inside. I will not put my name on your late bills. I will put it on my calendar when you come to dinner and do the dishes with me while we gossip about our neighbors." Brett frowned. "That's manipulative." "It is a fence," I said. "A fence protects both sides." Nora whispered, "Mom," as if the word contained 1,000 others. "We messed up." "Yes," I said, and I reached across the table. "And we may fix it. With time." Daniel rubbed his face. "So if I get my act together for a year, I get a house." "If you get your act together for a year," I said, "you get a mother who believes you are a man." He looked at me and finally nodded. 2 weeks later, he called and asked if he could take me to lunch with his own money. He arrived early in a shirt that still had a price tag hole because he had bought it on sale and felt proud. He told me he'd taken a stable job at a company that makes practical software for boring industries and that the boredom felt like a him. He had set his bills to auto-pay and canceled a subscription that sent him expensive razors monthly. I did not tell him that humility is the single most attractive cologne. I simply ordered dessert and paid for my half with a wink. Nora began coming on Thursdays again, awkward at first, then easier. We started with simple tasks, peeling carrots, folding laundry, sitting with tea on the porch while the twins told us secrets in loud whispers. She joined a weekend shift at a hospice down the street, once a month, and called me afterward to tell me about the woman who cried when someone brushed her hair. "I forgot," she said one night, "how it feels to be useful instead of visible." Brett smuggled himself into usefulness by discovering he could fix a squeaky hinge and then declaring himself the handyman. I let him replace a faucet and thanked him like he had installed an aqueduct. Pride is a shy animal. You feed it gently. There were slips. Daniel missed a Sunday because a friend's band played one last time, and the photos on the internet looked like a man trying to remember why he was still a boy. He came the next day with tulips and an apology that was not a performance. Nora attempted to crowdfund a kitchen remodel without telling anyone she was only trying to outrun her embarrassment. I discovered it, gently pressed pause, and sat with her while she cried into a tea towel that smelled like lemon oil. Autumn arrived with its sweet, decisive light. The geraniums took a bow and closed up shop. I took my walks and my statins and my naps on Sundays after the twins left crumbs shaped like galaxies on the sofa. Tamara came over twice, and we ate soup at the table and compared scars, the visible and the otherwise. She brought me a scarf the color of a bay leaf and told me I had earned a certain fineness. On a Tuesday in October, Ms. Klein called. "Just checking in on the surprise clause," she said. "Any grievances?" "Miracles," I said. "Small ones." By winter, Daniel's SUV smelled like old fries and responsibility. He made me coffee on Sundays that tasted like learning. He talked about a promotion not as proof but as possibility. He told me he had started putting €50 into an account he calls the grown-up fund. I mailed him a postcard from the city library gift shop, a picture of an oak tree. On the back I wrote, "In case of emergency, grow roots." Nora hosted supper at her house in December and nobody fought. The kitchen walls were still the old paint. She said she had learned to love the way the light took on the color of butter at 4 in the afternoon. The twins sang carols like sailors and fell asleep on my lap. Brett cleaned the pans without being asked. When I left, Nora pressed a paper bag into my hands. Inside were index cards with recipes she had copied for me in her handwriting, things her grandmother had made, things I had made, a soup from the hospice volunteer who taught her that shredding chicken is more respectful with your hands. I sat in my car and cried into those cards, then wiped my face and thought, this is how inheritance begins. Spring again. A full year since my heart gripped and the monitor sang its metallic lullaby. I stood at the bank vault with the attendant who now greets me like a cousin, and I read my own will like a letter from a woman I trust. I took out the photo of my husband and told him what I had done. I reclaimed our name, then opened our home. I sailed the Aegean and learned to count blessings in stones. I loved with a spine. At Sunday supper, I set the table with the good plates. Daniel arrived first, early, with a salad he made and a story about a client who told him, "We hired you because you answer emails." It felt like an insult, he said, and then I realized it was simply adult. Nora and the twins came with a pie she had baked so perfectly I wanted to call a magazine. Brett installed a dimmer switch and told us we looked softer in this light. I told him he was right. After we ate, I brought out a small wooden box. Inside were envelopes with their names. They looked at me as if I might once again rearrange the ground beneath their feet. "Relax," I said. "These are not deeds or excuses. They're tickets." Nora opened hers. "To Crete. You said you wanted to see the palace with the pictures of bulls," I said. "And learn to make that shredded chicken the Cretan way." Daniel's had a photograph of a ferry and a schedule with my notes in the margins, places to sit where the wind blesses you. "You said you never traveled because you liked the idea of leaving but didn't know how to pack," I said. "I am teaching you to pack." Brett's had nothing but a note. "Thank you for the faucet." He laughed, relieved and genuinely delighted. The twins got kites shaped like fish. We went outside and flew them until our arms ached and the neighborhood dogs went mad. When the sun slid down the street, I gathered them close and told them the last part. "I forgive you," I said. "Not as a performance. As a plan. The inheritance will be yours if you keep doing what you have done this year. Surprise me with time and stand on your own feet. I do not want to buy your love. I want to meet it in the doorway, both of us bringing something." Nora put her head on my shoulder like she did when she was small and had a fever. "We will keep showing up," she said. "Even when you're on a boat somewhere sending us postcards with drawings of olives." "I will come home between boats," I said. "And you will come over without announcements." Daniel took a breath that sounded like a man stepping onto firm land. "I was angry at you," he said. "For months. Because it is easier than being angry at myself. But then you made me tea and told me to set autopay." He laughed softly. I think that was the day I grew up. We sat then in the soft light Brett had installed and listened to the house breathe old wood, new rules. The twins sprawled on the rug, making sea creatures out of napkins. Tamara's scarf hung on the chair back like a leaf that had decided to stay forever. On the table the envelopes lay open, the tickets half slid out like tongues. Later that night, alone with the dishes and the quiet clink of plates, I realized that I no longer felt like a woman waiting by a phone. I felt like a woman with a fairy schedule, a recipe for lemon chicken, a clause in her will called surprise me with time, a heart that had survived its own rebellion, and a future full of rooms with windows opening onto water. In July, I returned to the Mediterranean. Not to run away or to punish anyone, but to collect mornings. I wrote long letters from a balcony in Crete where the air smelled like thyme and goat bells. I watched a boy teach his grandmother to use a phone camera. I learned to tie a scarf quickly when the wind turned mischievous. I sent Nora a postcard with a drawing of a little house and a garden exploding with geraniums. I sent Daniel one with a road that disappeared into the bright. On the back I wrote, "Keep going. It is not as far as it looks." And when I stepped again onto a ferry at Santorini, a realtor did call me. She apologized for bothering me on holiday, but said my daughter had inquired again, just in case. I laughed under the sun. "Tell her," I said, "that the house is still not for sale. Tell her instead to bring her mother a story when I get home." A surprising one. Love, I have learned, is not a handout. It is a ledger of attention and kindness and presence. And the only interest that cannot be faked is time. By autumn, no one asked about deeds anymore. We asked about recipes and fairy times and whether the twins could come over on Thursdays to practice their piano on my old upright, because they preferred the way it sounded in the living room with the rug that used to belong to my mother. Nora brought me a scarf from a market stall, the green of bay leaves, and said, "I want something of yours, too." I handed her a key not to a property, but to my house, to the kitchen where the spoons are always a little bent from use, to the porch where the afternoon light turns buttersoft. She cried and laughed and said, "I will let myself in and make tea." And Daniel, on a Sunday I will keep forever, arrived early and fixed the hinge on the pantry door without being asked. Then he made soup out of things he found in my refrigerator, and we ate standing up, laughing like students. Before he left, he pulled an envelope from his pocket. It held a copy of his last 3 bank statements and a note that said, 1 year. No bailouts. Surprise. I put the envelope with the recipes and the postcards and the ticket stubs. I am not counting money. I am counting time. I do not know how long I will live. No one does. But I know this. When the monitor fell silent for a moment, something inside me woke up. Not resentment. Not revenge. Something sturdier. A boundary with a view. If you were to walk past my house at supper time, you would see a table surrounded by people learning how to be a family again. You would see a woman at the head of the table who stopped giving away what she needed to keep and started asking, clearly and kindly, for what costs nothing and is worth everything. And if you were to peek at the folder in her drawer labeled the surprise clause, you would find a single sentence underlined. The inheritance will go to them only if they surprise me with time and become financially independent. That sentence is not a threat. It is the story of how we saved ourselves.
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video. Bye bye.